As we get into this week, your goal is to make sure that you are staying up on top of your work when it comes to our newest story of What's So Funny, Mr. Saiska. Notice that you have two sets of holes that is due this week. Set 2 should be due tomorrow, and set 3 should be due on Friday. So we're going to look at a couple of different things and review several things that we've talked about already this year when it comes to this first lesson on What's So Funny, Mr. Saiska. So we will begin like usual with looking at our introduction to this, looking at the beginning with what is the author's purpose. We've talked about already this year a couple times that there are 4 different types of author's purpose. They want to inform us, give us information, entertain us, persuade us, one view or another, or to express themselves. And in this particular case, this is humor, so that would be entertainment. When we talk about entertainment, then we often have these different elements, these different parts of that genre when it comes to humor or entertainment. A lot of it may include exaggeration, and sometimes those exaggerations are way far and extreme. When we talk about extreme languages, then they're usually like these all-inclusive terminologies. When we talk about memoirs, right? So we have these experiences, these things that they have personally been through. So we had a memoir with Into the Lifeboat. We've had a memoir when it comes to Brown Girl Dreaming. Now we have a memoir when it comes to What's So Funny, Mr. Shiska. So in these memoirs, then, we want to figure out, are we trying to fill in with the author's purpose one of these 4 categories? And as we start looking at different themes, what is the overall theme? What is the overall concept? What is it that the author is trying to get us to understand? Right? So it could be these are some common central themes of overall children's literature for upper elementary schools, and you guys are lower middle school, so you kind of fit in there. But these are the top 14 authors' themes that they try to get students to understand in their stories that they are writing. So when we're looking at the idea of we're wanting to entertain, but it's not just for the fun of it, right? What is it that our author, Mr. Shiska here, is wanting us to walk away with and wanting us to learn? When we talk about that extreme or those absolute languages, so that's part of what this literature adoption is. When it comes to those extremes, then we can often categorize that into our hyperboles. Once again, it's not hyperbole, it is hyperbole, exaggerations, right? And when it comes to absolute language, it's when we include everyone. So they may say, like, everyone was laughing, or I got all of them to burst out laughing as he's telling this story. Or maybe he's saying that no one was paying any attention. None of his grades were passing, or he never had any friends. Whatever the situation is that we're talking about, those are usually going to be hyperboles with absolute language. And that's an indication that it may not have necessarily been the truth, right? If we say that there was no one there and we look around, I mean, there's usually people here in this world. But maybe that meant that, when you and your friends were supposed to go bowling and there was no one there, that just your friends didn't show up. You were the only one that did. So we have to watch out for those different types of situations. But we have to just simply think. I mean, that's the key to it is when there's a statement being made, we have to think. We have to use our thinking voice so that we can come up with a conclusion. Well, how do we do that? So then we go back into this idea of when we're being entertained and we start asking questions of what these things mean, we have to stop and pause and think, is it what exactly is being said? So here's an example. All right, so we have what's called double meaning or double entendre when it comes to French. Right, so here's this little comic strip. I'll go through it with you. Right, so down at the bottom it says this is at the Webster's Dictionary's word assignment briefing. The boss is standing up at the front of the table. He says, Nicholas, I'm trusting you to define plethora for next year's edition. And then Nicholas is saying, Thanks, Mr. Lipney. It means a lot. Now, if we don't understand what plethora means and we don't understand what Webster's dictionary is and what's going on there, it may not be all that funny. But if we start thinking about what it must mean, it means a lot is a statement, right? He is saying to his boss, well, I appreciate what you're doing for me. I appreciate you giving me that big fancy word. I get to define it here. That means a lot to me. But he's also saying that the word plethora means a lot. A plethora of something is to have a lot of something. So we have this double meaning, this double entendre. Thanks, it means a lot. You think so much of me to give me this big fancy word. And by the way, that word means, it means a lot. Maybe you find it funny, maybe you don't. I personally do. We could have this kind of situation when it comes to humor, right? We see these beavers and they're like tearing up and looking up at their wood and their dam, and they're like, we've got termites, destructive little pests. Well, in their eyes, those are destructive little pests. But when we look around at all the beavers and what they're doing, those two are destructive little pests, right? So that's a type of exaggeration that we talk about when it comes to irony. So there are different types of irony. You get into these a little later on in life, but you have verbal irony, situational irony, um, and so I'll give you a couple of them that you can use when it comes to verbal irony. Sarcasm is often irony, right? So when you're freezing outside and running around in shorts, but it's like 25 degrees out, it's cold, you might like, oh yeah, it's a heat wave out here. It's so warm, it's so comfortable, when you know it's actually not. Or, here on Peppa Pig, the irony is that the firemen are there to put out a fire at the fire station. So there's some irony going on there. Or the idea that you see somebody slip and fall in a mud puddle and you laugh at them and you continue to walk only to find yourself deep into a bigger mud puddle. That's some situational irony as well. So just looking at these different types of figurative language that we talked about at the beginning of the year, sometimes we just have funny dialogue, right? Sometimes things are written to be humorous, right? So if you're designing something to be humorous, then you have to realize it's either going to be apparent, it's truly going to be funny just by the way it's being said, or maybe you have it hidden as something that's being said. So one of my favorite sections of Captain America Winter Soldier is the first time we ever meet the Falcon. He's out running around in Washington, D.C. And Captain America, he's running faster, obviously, because he's, the super soldier. He can always run faster. And one of the things you do when you're out running or jogging and you're coming up on someone, just so they know you're there, you say you're on your left. And so as the laps happen, Cap is constantly saying, on your left, on your left. And Anthony Mackie, the guy that plays the Falcon, is getting frustrated. And he's like, don't you say it anymore. Don't say it again. And he's like, on your left. And they end up being good friends. But, it's just situational irony and things that are sometimes written and intended to be funny. But how do we know all these? How can we go back and truly understand exactly what is being said? And a lot of these times we have to be able to infer. We've talked about this since the beginning of the year. Inferring means we're going to use what we're learning in school as well as what we have experienced in life, right? It could relate to a movie or a book you've already read, or just, hey, I was sitting at dinner with mom and dad last night and this came up, and hey, this is very similar to this situation in this story. It's relating your personal life and your personal experiences to what you're learning in school and applying it to the things that you are reading. Inferring is one of the biggest keys that I've tried to teach you to be successful readers. So when we start then looking at this particular story, we want to also re-examine the idea of mood and voice. And once again, they are two different things, but they go side by side. They are connected together, and this information continues to be on Canvas for you. All right, so when we start talking about the voice, that is the words that are specifically designed and picked for a particular piece of writing and sometimes in specific locations in the writing. The mood is the feeling, the emotion that the author is wanting you to get. So I have this particular story set up into 3 different tracks for comprehension. So that's what you're getting ready to do now. They are on Canvas for you. Just make sure that you're thinking about it. Make sure you're inferring. Make sure you're using your logic. And if there are some of the questions that you don't know, like hyperbole, then go back into all the tools I've given you on Canvas in your reference sections and in your announcements and relook at them. Put forth the effort to do well.